They're twisting the text. They are trying to conceal its true meaning. We've heard, but their edits are shallow. The truth will out someday.
Peace of the Lord to all of you. Welcome. We are back with Nermin to have a look at more mysteries in the Quran. Last time, Nermin left us with a bit of a cliffhanger. So we've been waiting to see what other mysteries he has discovered and more things that we can actually think about. So, Nermin, welcome back. How are you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, sir. I am preparing for my Balkan vacation, enjoying the summer, enjoying this unexpected heat wave that we have here in the north as well. So praise to the only true God. I'm doing good.
Great, great, great. I hope that you actually enjoy your holidays, and that means that the next episode will be probably after you have returned, so maybe in few weeks. So let's see if you are actually going to continue with the trend of leaving us with another cliffhanger or not. Would you like to tell the audience briefly what you discussed last time and where you left it off and what you are going to cover today?
Yes. So last time we discussed if the verbs salbi really means Roman crucifixion. And we reached the conclusion that it really does not mean that it does mean some sort of cementing or solidifying. We gave our arguments and our proof for that. So what we're going to try to do now is, if salbi does not mean Roman crucifixion, then where is the crucifixion of Jesus in the Quran? What does the Quran call it? How does the Quran communicate it and deal with it liturgically? That's what we're going to do today. And this is part 2 in our series, which we call Ask Those Who Read the Scripture Before Us. So the key verse will be verse 6 to 7 today in Surah 86. We're going to go through a lot. There will be we will be delving into different languages, so be patient with us. And if you have any questions, just write them in the chat, and we will try to ask them as we go along.
Great.
Are you ready?
So I will just add that one of the reasons why it is important to actually look for these words. We know that changing the diacritics in the Quran is something that happened a lot. We have done shows here on the channel, even going through the works of one of the papers of Munther Yunus, showing that changing the diacritics just changes the meaning. And seeing as Jesus is one of the names, one of the characters that appear the most in the Quran, this is basically Jesus and Moses, repeated again and again, it would be quite an easy thing to assume that we must have the crucifixion somewhere. It must be addressed. And if the word that we normally understood as crucifixion is not, then is there any other place where maybe they have played with the words, they have added a different diacritics or anything like that? So I look forward to see what you have figured out.
Excellent. So let us start. So here we have a disposition of what we're going to do today. We're going to talk shortly about a group that is connected, or that has a history with the Quran, named the Masoretes. We will be postulating the hypothesis that the Quranic claims regarding corruption of scripture refers to the Masoretic project that started roughly the same time that the Quran was written. We're going to be looking at the Masoretic and the Peshitta reading of special verses that are important for our topic. That is Psalm 22:16. We're also going to be looking at Exodus 12:46 and Zechariah 12:10. And we will also be delving into an apostolic writing called the Epistle Barnabas, and the concept that is called the new creation within Christianity, and how that reflects the Quranic message. We will also be looking at some writings of a Syriac church father named Jacob von Suruc, and his take on the crucifixion as humanity's victory or conquest over death and sin, and how that opened the exit door of the curse that was incurred by Adam during the fall of humanity. So we will do a deep dive in Surah 48, Surah Fath, which is translated usually as the victory, sometimes the opening. And we will end with the true meaning of Surah 62, verse 9, the Yawm al-Jummah, and how it evolved from being Jum'ah Adhima to the Great Friday, to Yawm al-Ayuba Qurba, the day of the great conquest, to Yawm al-Jummah, the day of Friday, the day of the Friday prayer. So that's our disposition. What do you think about this disposition, JC? Does it look
I think it is great. I think your original or your gut feeling that there is something to do like with the Masoretic. This is something that we are hopefully going to explore with Professor Robert Kerr when we had a live show with him just the other day, earlier in the week. Lloyd actually brought that up, that the process of creating the Masoretic was pretty much in Baghdad at the same time as the Quran develops the diacritics and so on. So it seemed to have happened basically in parallel. So there seems to be quite a lot there. We haven't explored that, but I will try to get as much information as I can as well from you. And then when we are having that discussion with Professor Kerr, bring it up and see if we find those connections. Maybe we can confirm your feelings about this or disprove them. Either way, it will be a move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Kerr is one of the leading experts when it comes to the Masoretic text. So he's definitely the right person to look at this and whether our connections are viable or not. Good point. All right, so let's tackle the Masoretes. Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, Surah 2, verse 79, where we read, فَوَيْلٌ لِلَّذِينَ يَكْتُبُونَ الْكِتَابَ بأيديهم ثم يقولون هذا من عند الله ليشتروا به ثمانا قليلا فويل لهم مما كتبت أيديهم وويل لهم مما يكسبون. So this expression at the beginning of this verse, فويل للذين يكتبون الكتاب بأيديهم, is the famous one that is used in the debate regarding the Islamic dilemma, where the Quranic author says, so woe to those who write the writing by their hands. And thereafter they say that that it's from Allah to purchase a little price. And the Quran condemns them for what they have written and accuses them that they have written something false. When it says, لَهُمْ مِمَا قَطَبَتْ أَيْدِيهِمْ. So we're going to see what is it that they have written. And many a times in this debate regarding the Islamic dilemma, there is a verse after this where it says that the people who are doing this written corruption, they're also saying something that is heretical, so to say. So there is a back and forth in that debate. We're going to try to understand why is there an accusation of scriptural corruption, but also why there is a verse afterwards that talks about something something condemning an oral teaching. All right, so we'll start with the Masoretes and who they were. So the Masoretes were a group of scribes who commenced on a project, during the 6th or 7th century. They commenced on a project to produce a textual tradition of the Old Testament that is today considered, especially in academia, to be the most authoritative. So it's considered the Masoretic text, which we call the Hebrew Bible, is considered today to be the most authoritative by both religious Jews, but also by Western academia, by Western scholars. So their craft is considered to be like of the highest standard, which is interesting because it seems that the corruptors have become the uppermost. Yeah, maybe. So the complete project of the Masorites we have in the Leningrad Codex that is dated to 1008 CE. There is an earlier codex called the Aleppo Codex, which is 1 years older, but it lacks big parts of the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses. But the differences between the Leningrad Codex and Aleppo Codex are quite minimum. All right. So this group, the Masorites, they were split into two factions. So the first faction was the Tiberian faction, which is the Jerusalem, Palestinian, Israeli faction at the western shore of the Sea of Galilee, and the other faction is the Babylonian side along the Tigris and Euphrates River in Iraq, which means not Mecca and Medina. So that's the interesting thing. All right. And their leader was a guy called Aaron ben Moses ben Asher, and he's considered their most prominent representative. So what the Masorites contributed with is that they developed a system of vocalization of the Hebrew text, similar to how the Muslims developed the diacritics to the Arabic Quranic text. And they essentially also revived the Hebrew language, which was only a liturgical and written language. Aramaic was dominating it. So they also did they had a really elaborate system of counting letters, words, signs to check and double check whether their scripture reading was correct or not. So they had a collection of notes that they called the Masora Magna. There's a large and small Masora. It's a really intricate system. And this is interesting because the Quran has a verse 28 in Surah 72, where it kind of says that God has counted the number of all things, which might be a response to the Masorites, like you are good at counting, but God is better at counting, sort of. So they also constructed special letters that indicate the occurrence of a certain form of word, and they introduced something called the ketiv and the kare, which are certain consonants that could be written but not pronounced because they were deemed wrong by the Masorites or heretical. I think you have something similar in the Quran, which is like the Hamza. And the kare are denoted as read in the writing, and they're tended to be pronounced out loud or pronounced in a different way. And then you have the ketiv, the written. You also have the kere perpetua, which are things like you would never pronounce, like the divine name. So instead of Yud Haweh How, you would say Adonai or something like that. As you said, Dr. Kerr is an expert in this, but also Dr. Dan McClellan, Dr. Kip Davis, if you want to do deeper studies, we're just giving a summary. And they engaged in this project in order to bring about the right reading of the Masoretic text of the Hebrew Bible, but also to aid the reading, like you have the glotton stop in the Quranic Arabic, etc. What modern scholars do is they compare this Masoretic text to the much older Septuagint, like the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, and sometimes they also use the Peshitta, which is like the Syriac translation of the Hebrew Bible, the Orata. So there is a lot of correspondence between the Greek Septuagint and the Masoretic text, but there are also important differences. And one of these important differences is how the reading of Psalm 22:16 And there was like a big contention between the Masoretes and those that followed the Septuagint. And our hypothesis is that the Quran is basically like touching upon this tension. In addition to the Septuagint, we also have the discoveries of the Dead Sea Scrolls that were discovered in Qumran in 1947. Some of the Dead Sea Scrolls, like the Great Isaiah Scroll, they confirmed the Masoretic text, not word by word, but still in large chunks. But other Qumran scrolls, like the Book of Jeremiah, they seem to confirm the Septuagint version, because the Book of Jeremiah is 1/6 shorter than the Masoretic text in the Septuagint version. So yeah, that's a little bit about Masoretes. Was this a good summary? Do you have like a good picture about what their project was about and why it created like this tension, JC?
Well, I'd say it's a brief summary. Yes, I have some disagreements with this. First one, that it is the one accepted as being the better of the two, better than the Septuagint. Say, I disagree with that. I hear more and more scholars saying that's not the case, that the Masoretic actually comes way later, and we have a problem with the vowels. Basically, in order for you to have that text, you need the vowels, and the vowels are introduced very late. It happens in Aramaic, in Hebrew, and in Arabic. And we see in Arabic that a big problem is how you put the diacritics. So with the Masoretic, we basically have the same thing happening. So I think people are starting to gravitate towards, no, the Masoretic is not the one that we should look at. It was a very late creation. And in some cases, and there is this clear example about the prophecy of they will pierce the Messiah from the Songs of David, that says basically they will look at him whom they have pierced, and in the Masoretic it reads they will look at him like a lion or something like that, because they put the diacritics in a different way. So the thing is that you break the whole sentence. It doesn't make any sense the way that it is there. So it looks almost like they tried to remove some of the prophecies of Jesus. So this is basically being at the moment basically audited for the first time en masse, and we will see what happens in the coming years. But another studies that have been done is that the New Testament, when they're quoting the Old Testament, they're actually quoting the Septuagint, and that has now been proven. A lot of the stuff is just copy-pasted, basically just quoting the Septuagint version, and there are now more and more versions being found from written in Greek, because, like you said before, the liturgical language, nobody would actually understand the Old Hebrew, but every single person pretty much in the empire, they had been Hellenized, they actually spoke Greek. That was the lingua franca. So there will be problems with that, and we will see as more studies are done and so on, and I will try to see what Robert Kerr says about this. Now, the other problem that...
Yes, go for it, Jason.
Yeah, the other problem that I would have, and it's actually not a big problem, it's something to consider, is that the Quran was written in, at least for the most part, or rather put together in the 7th century. The Masoretic is actually put together after that point. So if there was this group walking around saying we're using this Old Testament, and they are already reading it in a specific manner, then the person who knows that they're trying to put the vowels in the wrong places would have to be incredibly familiar with both the Septuagint version, that then it gets translated into whichever language they are reading, probably Aramaic, and what they are doing at the time in the Hebrew. And when we look at the Quran, we really don't see that, maybe because it's been removed. The stories written in there, they are either with details, with wrong details compared to the Old and New Testaments. A clear example is in Surah 28, it says that Moses was in Madian. Well, it doesn't say the place, of course. And after his 2 terms had elapsed, he was on his way back. And that's when he sees the burning bush, but that's actually the story of Jacob. So we see that the stories in there are just not correct. Plus, we have the apocryphal gospels and the the legends. So there is a lot of stuff in there. In fact, just by reading the verse that you showed before that says, "Woe to those who write the scripture with their own hands," is like, why do you have Alexander the Great or the sleepers in the cave in the Quran? So on the one hand, it would indicate a very high knowledge of what is going on with this whole Masoretic project, and on the other hand, getting everything in the Quran just from legends instead of from the biblical account. So anyway, just putting that out there, and we see actually how you continue with this. But yeah, problems. I think the Masoretic versus the Septuagint thing is being studied now, so it will be controversial.
Yes, indeed. There are. I was talking more about like the majority of academia, but there are like tendencies to towards moving towards granting the Septuagint more reliability, so to say. We also actually have manuscripts that were discovered after Qumran regarding Psalm 22:16, which we will look at further on in the translation in the presentation. And when it comes to the time periods and the Quran, I think you're onto something, because we're always like reading 2 layers of the Quran. We're reading we're trying to get to the underlying Christological layer, like the Proto-Quran, and we always have hanging over our heads the layer that was created by the standard Islamic narrative. So we are like we are treading carefully, but I will touch upon some of the things that you mentioned regarding Psalm 22:16 further on in the presentation. I just wanted to show like this verse, which is sometimes used to argue that the Quran is not talking about scriptural corruption, which is the verse after 79, where it says, "قالوا لن تمسنا النار إلا أياما معدودة قل أتحدتم عند الله عهدا فلن يخلف الله عنده أم تقولون على الله ما تعلمون ما لا تعلمون." So like this expression where they're actually like saying something, where they're saying like they said the fire will not touch us except more than 10 counted days. From what I have presented regarding the Masoretes, you can see that their project was a written project, but it also had to do with like the oral tradition. They were trying to bring an oral tradition into writing, which is the reason for why the Quran is first accusing them for written corruption, but then it says that they say something heretical that comes from their like tradition, from their oral tradition. So what I'm trying to say in this debate regarding the Islamic dilemma, both sides are sort of correct. Both the side that says there is like accusation of scriptural corruption, and the side that says no, it's like only about oral tradition, because the Masoretes were coming from an oral tradition, which they were trying to put into writing, and they actually succeeded. So that is what I'm trying to. That is my main point. Like that, if you want to find, if you want to understand how 79 is connected to 80, it is by basically understanding the Masoretic project. Do you agree at least on that, like minimum level?
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. That here the author would be saying to the Masoretes, like, look, they are actually writing stuff themselves, basically, because they're changing stuff, and they are saying that it is from God. And the very next verse is saying, and they say, oh, no, don't worry, we're not going to be in hell for an eternity. If we go there, it's going to be just for a short period of time. And the author is saying, oh, really? Did you actually take a covenant with God yourself that we don't know of? Something like that? Or are you just speaking without knowledge? You think that you are allowed to do what you are doing and that God is just going to basically be okay with it. So yeah, so that's pretty much how it is. May I actually just ask you something now that we are on this verse? It's in a little bit of a tangent, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
In here, it's supposed to actually be talking, I believe, to the Jewish people, not to the Jews and Christians, just to the Jews. And then, which is actually pretty much as well what you are saying. Saying, did you take yourselves a covenant at Allah? Okay, there is an expression elsewhere in the Quran that says, blah, 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 for those who have taken a covenant at Ar-Rahman. And I think we had discussed already that there is a difference between when the Quran is talking about Allah and when it's talking about Ar-Rahman. Would you believe or would you think that in this one it's talking to the Jews, so he's saying, did you actually take a covenant directly with God? And in the other verse, when it says, did you take a covenant at Ar-Rahman, is saying, did you just take a different covenant with Jesus?
Yeah, possibly if you're talking about pre-incarnate God the Son, like the angel of the Lord. Is that what you're like hinting at?
Well, I think the one about the covenant at Ar-Rahman is in Surah 19, which is after incarnation. So it would be for the current times.
Okay. So that the Quranic author is like saying the old covenant has been superseded. The old covenant of Allah has been superseded by the new covenant of Ar-Rahman.
Possibly something to explore.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I have absolutely no clear opinions.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that. Over to
No
you.
worries. I'm open to exploration when it comes to that. All right. So the interesting thing is, you said before, like the Quranic author would have to have certain knowledge about the Masoretic project. The Masorites would have to be able to like do their project, but also like extend their influence to other groups. So we do have a historical source or historical fact. This is from Dr. David Bertena's article, Bodily Resurrection and the Anti-Tritheist Debate, where he says that during the Sasanian-Byzantine War, which was between 611 and 629, so that was like shortly before the Quranic project, if we can call it, which led to the Persian occupation of Jerusalem in 614. The Sasanians, they placed prominent Jewish leaders in charge of the region. So you had Jewish leaders that had like administrative powers. So you see here that the Masorites are receiving like greater resources, like greater administrative power to implement their oral reading of the Torah into written text. So their projects does become more visible, so to say, by this new administrative authority that they have received. And there is a interesting word in the Quran, which I think you have explored a lot before, but the Quran and Dr. Lafontaine, he usually translates this word as allies, and his hypothesis does build on that translation. But what I would suggest here is that the word actually, by translating it the way Saint Murad has translated it, does reflect like this historic reality of these Jewish leaders becoming in charge, becoming administrators of the region, where one group of the Masorites, the Tiberian faction, is working from. So we read here in Surah Al-Imran, Surah 3, verse 28, we read, لا يتخذ المؤمنين الكافرين أولياء من دون المؤمنين ومن يفعل ذلك فليس من الله في شيء إلا أن تتقوا منهم تقاة ويحذركم الله نفسه وإلى الله المصير. So we read here in the way this Saint Murad has translated it, this word awliya, believers should not take covers as administrants, as people that have certain rule apart from believers. And whoever does that, then it's not from Allah in a thing, except that you forfend from them. A forfending, and Allah cautions you from Himself, and unto Allah is the destined place. So what I'm trying to postulate here is that Saint Murad is onto something when he translates the word awliya as administrants instead of allies. That probably the Quranic text in its original is when it says, do not take them as administrants, forfend against them, resist the rule, that it's actually reflecting this reality, the actual administrative rule that they had. So the believers are feeling uncomfortable with this, being ruled by the Masorites, and they're feeling uncomfortable with the Masorites having been given greater authority to extend their Masoretic project. What do you think about this hypothesis, JC?
Okay. Well, first, let's not jump to conclusions and go from here to a full story. But what you have just said actually makes a lot of sense. Have a look at this. Let me actually just share my screen for a second. So this is one of the documents I'm working on at the moment, which is from Ben Abrahamson. And he's the one that, I think he may have been the one that put forward what you have just discussed, that during the Sassanid-Persian War, the Persians conquered the city in the year 614, and they put in control the Jewish leaders. And he actually goes into detail explaining what is going on, why they did that. And basically it is because they are on their way to conquer Egypt, which is their goal. And it's more beneficial for them to not have the Christians in charge. So it's just a political move. They put them in charge. And for a very brief period of time, they are... the Jewish people, they reestablish the sacrifices, and I think they begin to start to build the third temple. But that doesn't go very well. It doesn't last very long. In fact, he says it's probably just a number of months before the Christians actually go and start creating havoc, and there is a civil war. There is a section in his paper about civil war between the Jews and the Christians inside of Jerusalem, which actually then leads to the guy who has control of the city, to Nehemiah ben Hushel, to be assassinated. And then the Persians, they have to go back in with a lot of force, and the whole thing goes really, really bad. So based on what you have said, if we thought that imagine that this was written right there in Jerusalem, as in these sections of the Quran, written in Jerusalem by, say, Christians. That's actually what this would be the propaganda they are using, or the documents saying to Christians, hey, do not take the coverers, who are the deniers of Christ, as administrants. So I know there's a huge jump from just this one line to, hey, maybe this was written by Christians in Jerusalem in the year 614, but some data is in there. But what you said before about what happened in the year 614, yeah, that's spot on. And academia is starting to change. They used to believe that what happened is the Persians got there and they laid siege to the city, but that didn't happen. The city surrendered immediately. They put the Jewish, previously probably, I don't know if he was the exilarch, but he put him in charge of the city. Then they have a civil war between Christians and Jews, and then they have to retake the city. So, didn't go too well. But anyway, yeah, good digging.
Yeah, and the point is, when you get new rulers, sometimes you might dislike those rulers because their administration is bad from an economic or judiciary or social point of view. But you might also dislike new rulers if they're trying to enforce an idea or a project on you which you don't like, especially if it is a group which you have a history with, a history of great tension. So at least in my head, it kind of makes sense that by being the new rulers, the Masorites, they would probably be given greater resources to try to push their projects, and that this would probably not sit good with the Christian population regarding the prophecies about Jesus in the Old Testament. But we're trying to create an opening for further research. I think Dr. Kerr will probably be able to dig into this a bit deeper, but we were just showing that the Quran as an evidence, as a point of evidence, does steer us towards that. All right, so let's go into the nitty-gritty. So apologize for it's a lot of languages. Write to us in the comment if we have gotten anything wrong when it comes to all these languages, and we will do our best to try to correct it. So all right, so let's start with the Masoretic reading of Psalm 22:16, where it says, "Kivuni klaim adat meraim hikifuni kari yadai veraglai." So the Masoretic reading, literal reading, says, "Dogs have surrounded me, a band of evil doers has encircled me. Like a lion, they are at my hands and my feet." And the NRSV usually follows the Masoretic reading, so it translated as, "For dogs are all around me, a company of evildoers encircles me, my hands and feet have shriveled." So anyways, you can see it's really controversial reading, especially this word ka'ari, which means like a lion. So no piercing here, no prophecy about Jesus. And if you have rulers forcing this on you, you're going to get upset as a Christian. So if we look at the Septuagint and the Peshitta reading of Psalm 22:16, which were there before the Masoretic project, we read in the Peshitta, "Metul dachtruni, kalbe waknushta, dbisha karkuni bza'u edei vreglai." And in the Greek Septuagint, we have the word orokshan, which is used. And the way the Septuagint and the Peshitta translates it is, "For the vicious have surrounded me, the assembly of the wicked have enclosed me, they have pierced my hands and my feet," which actually means they have dug. But if you're going to dig a hole, you need to pierce the hole. You need to make a opening. So you can see here that clearly the Masoretic reading is in contradiction with the Septuagint and the Peshitta on a very important issue, which regards the prophecy of the coming Messiah and what will happen to him. And now the question is, what does the Qumran manuscripts actually tell us? We have a manuscript that was discovered at Nahal Hever. It's a fragment called 5/6 HEVPS from the West Bank. There were explorations made in the West Bank in the 1960s, and this fragment from the Nahal Hever, it dates to the 1st century CE, and it seems to say ka'aru instead of ka'ari. So instead of saying ka'ari, like a lion, it seems to say ka'aru, like they dug. So you have here, when you're analyzing this fragment, you have to see, okay, is it a waw, as in ka'aru, as in dug, pierced, or is it a yod, as in ka'ari? And people that have looked at this, the epigraphers, they have said that it says ka'ari, actually dug, pierced. But the majority of scholars, at least for now, say that the ink is too faded to be certain. So whether the Quranic author is right, and majority of Christians that are accusing the Masorites for corruption, we can't draw any clear conclusions. But it is a topic which is, there are a lot of discussions about it, as you can see. And I've also granted some sources here. So I think this was in line with what you said previously, right, JC?
Yeah, and I'm actually looking for a video that I watched quite recently where a Jewish guy who is now a Christian explains actually this verse as well and how the difference of the letters, why that confusion is there. And it's basically because one line could be longer and the other one shorter. But he explains it very well. I'm going to see if I can actually find the video and I'll just put it on screen so that people who are interested about this very specific verse, they can actually just watch from a guy who understands these things in a lot of detail, just explaining it very, very clearly.
Excellent. I can just keep talking for now. So this verse is a source of tension, and at least according to my hypothesis, this is the reason for why the Quranic author is attacking the Masoretes. And this is a subject that is debated to this day. And I believe I listened to Dr. Rabbi Tovia Singer, where he was like arguing that, the Masoretic reading is correct. And this was like David lamenting. But the thing is, like, Jesus does claim to be the son of David. So it's... What I can say is that what you previously said, that the New Testament authors, they did not use the Masoretic writing. They did use the Septuagint. There is a book by Dr. Marcus Vincent, which is called Christ's Torah, where he goes through this. A lot of source of tension. But the interesting thing is, the Quranic author is going to touch on the other two verses from Zechariah and from Deuteronomy much more than he's going to touch on Psalm 22:16.
Okay, found that. Let me just share my screen very quickly. So it was this video over here. So it was actually very, very recently from Sean McDowell. So in here, he actually explains some of that bit. It was actually a very, very good discussion with this guy because he actually explains as well what some people think. Basically, he touches on the Masoretic a little bit. So yeah, this one totally recommended. So anyone who wants a little bit more of information, just give it a watch.
Excellent.
Over to you.
All right. Yeah, well, let's continue our exploration. Psalm 22:16, absolutely, it's a source of contention. But really, from what I can see from my research, it is Exodus 12:46 and Zechariah 12:10 that are much more relevant for how the Quranic author is trying to convey the crucifixion, and also, of course, John 19. But what I'm trying to say, what is interesting with this is that, yes, the Quran is accusing the Masoretes of scriptural corruption, but the reason for why the Quranic author is doing this is because he thinks that the Masoretes are undermining the prophecies in the Old Testament that support the crucifixion of Jesus. So that is like an important point in this debate regarding the Islamic dilemma, whether the Quranic author is accusing the Masoretes for textual corruption or not. I think let this stick because this is really important. All right. Okay, so let's look at Exodus 12:46. We have here, you will see that they do sort of align here much more, the Masoretic version and Peshita and Septuagint. So here we have bebehat tahat yakel lo tosimin hababayit min habashar husa wasem lo tishberu bao. So literally it means in one house it shall be eaten. You shall not take out / carry forth off or / from the house off, from the flesh / the meat outside, and a bone not you shall break of it. And NRSV says, it shall be eaten in one house, you shall not take any of the animal outside the house, and you shall not break any of its bones. And the Pshita and the Septuagint read the same. Here we have the Pshita, which says, Bahad Beit Thethachel ولا ثقون من بسرة لبان من بيته وغرمة لا تثبرون به. In one house it will be eaten, and you shall not remove its flesh outside of the house, and the bones in it you shall not break. So here it seems like they seem to agree with each other. And the same thing with when it comes to the to Zechariah 12:10, there will be a certain difference when it comes to the Septuagint on the one hand, and the Masoretic and the Pshita version. Here the Masoretic and the Pshita will agree with each other, but the Septuagint will differ, which is interesting. So here we read in the Masoretic version, وَشَّبَّكْتِ al-Bet Dawid wa al-Yawasheb Yerushalim روح حن وتحنونم وحبتو الات عشر ذكروا وشبيدو علاو كمسبة حياهيد وحامر علا كحامر الحبكوفر. Literal reading, and I will pour out on the house of David, on the dwellers of Jerusalem, a spirit of grace and supplication, and they will look on me whom they have pierced. So here you have the piercing in the Masoretic reading. And they will mourn for him like the mourning over the only one, and grieving over him like the grieving over a firstborn. NRSV, and I will pour out the spirit of compassion and supplication on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, so that when they look on the one whom they have pierced, they shall mourn for him as one mourns for an only child, and weep bitterly over him as one weeps over a firstborn. So great. The Masoretic here and the academic version also has piercing. So you have in the Pshita, you have the same thing where we read Washdoch al Beit David wal Yathba de Urishleim Ruha deit Buta wal Rahme wal Nahrun Bidakar ونستدون ألوهي أي جديدة دو هداية ونقرون ألوهي أي قرقارة de Bukra. I will pour out upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of mercies, and they shall look upon me whom they have pierced. So they agree here, which is interesting, the Pshita and Masoretic version. But the Greek one, that one actually differs, which is interesting. And the Greek says, what is it? Kai, etrokai, sorry. Ekcheo epi ton oikon David kai epitos potoikontas Jerusalem pneuma charitos kai o iktirmo kai epiblesontai pros me ant hon katorcesanto kai kopsontai ep auton kopeton hos ep agapeton kai odunetesontai odunen hos ep prototoko. Here the Septuagint actually translates it differently, where it says, and they shall look upon me because they have mocked me. Sort of reflecting like the crucifixion being a humiliation, like the whole passion story. So here we have an interesting difference when it comes to the Septuagint, that the Septuagint seems to be more pointing towards the actual like humiliation, like the passion narrative, while the Pshita and the Masoretic seem to be talking more about the piercing. What do you think about this? Here they seem to be more in line with each other, right, than in Psalm 22:16.
Feels a little bit weird, and I apologize before actually I got the verses wrong, but it was actually about David, the one that said about the lion. I thought so, but I quoted the one from Zechariah. But yeah, this is interesting how this would be for a linguist to actually say how they would go or how they would interpret this one in that manner in the Septuagint, when the rendering with different vowels would actually give the Pierce version, which is elsewhere as well in the Bible. So I would have thought that they would read both of them exactly in the same manner. And I don't know, it is almost like a happy coincidence that in both of them they happen to be things that did happen. So it could have been a matter of the confusion, not the confusion, so that it was meant to have two words, and they were read in a specific manner. By the time that we got to the Septuagint, it was read in that manner, but by the time that we got to the Masoretic, then it changed, and in one of them, it just changed in a way that sort of still validates what was before, the wisdom of God. But I'll just make another comment before we move on, and it was about, let me actually just go back on the slides so I can refresh my memory. Was it actually, I think it was this one. Oh, yes. So this verse about, and they will, what is it? That they will mourn, they shall mourn for him as one mourns for an only child. I think Ben Abrahamson, if I remember correctly, I still have to go through the paper again and so on. But they attach that during the year, basically 614, 617, I think it's in 617, when Nehemiah ben Hushel is assassinated, that they actually say that he is the one fulfilling this prophecy, the one that they actually have the mourning, they mourn for him, because they basically thought that he was going to bring forth the Messiah. He's the one that was going to reestablish the sacrifices, which he did most likely, and starting to build temple. But of course, as they would have in the scriptures, they would expect the Messiah ben Joseph, which would be Nehemiah. Nehemiah was Nehemiah ben Hushel, I think Ben something else, Ben Joseph. So it's like they had that thing in there, and yes, they exegeted this as being him. So at the very least, we can conclude it was a very highly messianic period. Everybody was waiting for the Messiah. The Jews were waiting for the Messiah. The Christians were waiting for the Messiah to return. And everybody was just, waiting and see what happens. So a time of unprecedented turmoil, the likes of which we have not seen until the year 2026. So there you go. Thought you would find that interesting.
Yeah, and it's like if you mess with my prophecies and my Messiah, then I will come at you, so to say. And if you're messing with my Messiah, my prophecies, and you're going to administer me, rule me, well, then we have even bigger issues.
And actually, yes, something for you to consider, because you are the one actually looking at these particular topics. If what happened in Jerusalem, and Ben Abrahamson makes it very clear, it was a very brief period, but they were saying that this guy, Nehemiah ben Hushel, would be the Messiah, the one that actually had to come just before the next one, then maybe try to read that through the lens of the Quran, whether the Quran is addressing that by saying, no, the Messiah ben Joseph was not Nehemiah, it was always Jesus, or something like that. So something for you to consider when you are actually reading through the Quran and trying to make sense of some verses, in case that is a reason why Jesus is generally described as Messiah. Messiah appears next to him almost, in lots of places. If this was perhaps a reason, just food for thought.
Yeah, absolutely something to explore. And also, like, what is the character named An-Nabi? Like, this the prophet doing there? Like, does he have any connection to all of this, or was he just added later? That's what I'm always thinking about in my head. Before I continue, the right part of the presentation is going into a bit, so I'm not seeing all of it. Is it possible to move it just a bit to the left?
No, I think that's actually just the way that it was actually created. I don't think that I have any power over that. I don't know if you can do something at your end. but
Okay.
I don't think
I'll
so.
try. I'll do
No.
my best.
And just before we move on, so for people watching, we have quite a few people that are actually coming in and out, but nobody's leaving any comments. So if you are listening to us, please pop into the comment section, say hi, so that we know that you are watching. And if you have any questions, please leave them here, and we can hopefully address them live.
Excellent. Let's see here. Yeah, it's. I will. Anyways, so I will try to do my best. I think in the presentation I have to move the text to the left. But if I try to do that right now, yeah, I probably.
We can
let's
see most
just
of
work
it.
with what we have.
So yeah, if there is anything that you don't actually know what it says, maybe just open the presentation at your end and then read it from your screen, and we will follow along with what we have here on the screen.
Okay, excellent. I can do that. That would make it easier for me. Absolutely. So I'll do that, and I'll go to my end here. I think we are, and I will ask you to click forward. Let's see here. All right. So you're seeing this John 19 verse 31 to 34, right? Everybody's seeing that.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So Christ's open wound, the opening, al-fath, is the thing that causes the birth of the new human being. This is the opening of that wound. The al-fath is the great conquest of sin and death. And in the book of John, that is what is being alluded to when it comes to the Zechariah verse and the Deuteronomy verse. So we read here in the Pshita, Yehudaye den Methol, Da'aruba. Remember this word, Aruba, which means Friday in Syriac. It will be important later on. Huat Amrin, La Nabutun Pakre Halin, Al Zugapayhon, Metol de Shabata, Nega Yoma Hwa Ghair, Raba Yoma de Shabata, Hiwabau, Men Pilatos de Netbrun, Shkeihon, Denon Skipa, Wanechtun Non. So we read here in Lamson's translation, now because it was Friday, the Jews said, let not these bodies remain on their crosses, because the Sabbath is dawning. For the Sabbath was a great day. Also remember this, like the great day, the day of the great conquest. So they besought Pilate to have the leg of those who were crucified broken and to have them lowered down. And I'm moving on in my presentation. You see John 19:32, right?
Yes.
Excellent. So here we read Waitha Estrotiotae Wataburu Shakawi Dokadmaya Walhau Akhrina de Estkap Ameh. So the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first one and of the other one who was crucified with him. We move on to John 19:33. You have that.
Yeah, these ones, by the way, they are reading properly on the screen. So if you want to actually return to StreamYard, you can see
then I can move back. All right. Good. So here in John, this one is important. John 19:33, we read Wahad Etha Lawat Yeshu Hazo Zmit Leich Men Qadwo Walathbar Shkowahe. But when they came to Jesus, listen to this, they saw that he was dead already. Very important. So at this stage, what is hanging on the cross, JC, is not a living human being. Remember that. He's already dead. He's on the cross and he has taken his last breath. At this stage, Jesus on the cross is a complete solid. He's a sulbi, a corpse. He's a hanging substance. He's an alaka. Anyways, but when they came to Jesus, they saw that he was already dead, so they did not break his legs. We continue reading. Elahad men estrotayuta مخاية بدبناخ بالوقتية ومخذة نباك دماء ومايا. But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and immediately blood and water came out. So you see here, when this piercing is taking place, Jesus is already dead. He's a sulbi, he's a corpse that is hanging from the cross. He's a hanging substance. He's an alaka. And this point in history, if we take the crucifixion to be historical, this point in history, when Jesus is already dead, when he's hanging, when he's an alaka, a hanging substance, and when the soldiers are piercing his side, this is the al-Fath. This is the opening. This is when the new creation begins. This is what the Quran is glorifying, so to say. And we read here, you can stop me anytime you want, JC. Maybe, yeah. Well, what do you think about these verses in the Gospel of John? That the verse in Zechariah and Deuteronomy are actually references to, or at least from the point of the Quranic author and of the author of the Gospel of John, that they're about when Jesus has actually taken his last breath.
This is interesting because we know that there is this tension between what happened to Jesus in the Quran, and then when we go to the traditions, everybody's having a different opinion. And if you go through the tafsirs, particularly of Ibn Kathir, it begins with the scholars disagree with what happened, and then everybody's saying something different, including the Christian explanation. So it's all over the place. But not only that, then we have the verse that is supposed to be about Muhammad saying, well, if he died or was unalive, would you then turn on your heels? So we know there is this huge tension in the Quran with what is going on. So the fact that you're actually pulling up these verses and saying, let's actually show how this is going to link to the Quran is very, very fascinating. I'm looking forward to the next slide. Let me just show you something. You see how don't quote me on this. This is called numerology. But when I see, for example, that the Quran has 6,236 verses, like specifically the version that was canonized, I do think, is it possible that the guy who basically was doing this canon, he knew that he had to split things to reach that number? He was very close. Why? Because the first number is 6, the last number is 6, and the 2 in the middle is 2 times 3 is 6, 666. It's almost like, is it possible that they tried to code things? And the reason why I'm saying this is because, let me actually share screen as well very quickly, that when you showed this one here, John 19:33, I thought, hey, hang on a minute. What happens if we look at Surah 19, verse 33? And this is what it says. Do you think?
Wow. Yeah. That's the Mary Surah, which is about Jesus.
Yeah, but specifically, like, this is on me, the day I was born, the day I die, and the day I am raised alive. And I mean, I don't even know if at that point, for example, the Bible already had all of the breaks done in this manner, or if that is actually a later thing. So this is not something I have explored. We know that the Quran also went through many changes. I mean, they changed even the names of the surahs. So maybe it's just a massive coincidence. And out of the 4 Gospels, but still, seeing as the Gospel of John begins with, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Quran says that Jesus is the Word of God, and then we go to 1933 as we have it here, and it actually points at a verse in the Quran that happens to acknowledge the actual death and resurrection. I don't know. Let's call this a happy coincidence.
Yeah, and just if you think about the historic reality, the Masoretes were doing a lot of counting. The Quranic author is saying that he's doing a lot of counting. There is like a lot of counting going on. So it would be like a surprise if they didn't try to code stuff in numbers. There's an article in the latest Inara volume by Gerhard Erpuin where he's trying to solve the mysterious letters in the Quran by going through the Pshita reading of the Book of Psalms. actually. So I don't think your hypothesis is too far-fetched when we look at what was actually going on at this time. All right. So
Let me say, just because of what you have said, sorry. So I would say why Professor Puin would actually try that. I have tried that. He's not going to get anywhere for a number of reasons, unfortunately. But I tried going to the Psalms, and it is because of the longest psalm in the Psalms happens to actually start with something similar to the Mukatat and all of those different links. All of that basically ends up going nowhere, and the reason is there were too many changes happening. So by the time that we get to the Mukatat being disjointed letters, the whole thing has actually broken. But in terms of the counting, this is a very well-established thing. So the Jews were incredibly good at that, of having the particular letters. This is a whole science of how to have the particular letters and how they relate to each other. Also, one of the verses that you showed actually earlier that reminded me that I think it is in one of the Targums, could be, I think it's in one of the Targums, that says that in the beginning, basically, they wouldn't have the vowels in the Torah because they were not invented yet. But it is, but it describes a particular rabbi who will come later, who will be given, I think, that knowledge, and then he will be able to actually put them. And there is a whole tradition around that. I can't remember, don't quote me on this, it's been a while, but that is actually addressed in the Jewish traditions. But if we look at the Christian traditions, they also had that thing, which now we don't think about it. But if you go and you speak with a priest, he will tell you the whole Bible is incredibly full of symbolism. All of the numbers mean many things, and some of the numbers, they're actually symbolic to something else. They will tell you these sort of things. So it is a tradition that certainly the Jews had it in Hebrew on a whole different level, but the Christians were also doing these things. So to look at the Quran and expect that the writers would have done that, I think is pretty much a given. My argument would be I have looked into it, and I don't think it's possible to decipher it now because of all of the changes that they made. Basically, we don't have the original. So maybe you could find something in particular surahs, and you think that that is the code that they were using, but on balance of probability, they've changed things, and now you are basically following numerology. You are seeing shapes in the clouds, but they really don't mean anything. It's like the whole thing about the miracle of 19. I don't believe in that at all because because the Quran went through changes. So now you can actually go and look and find the number 19 everywhere, but that is you imposing that on the text. You could do the same with any number. It becomes numerology. If you had the original, I think it would be packed with this sort of codes. But at this point, if you found a code, you wouldn't be able to take that to the rest of the book to unpack it. That is actually my view. But if with the help of AI, people can figure it out, it would be phenomenal because it would help us to roll back the clock and seeing the earlier version. But anyway, that would be a whole topic to discuss at one point.
Yeah, because when Rashad Khalifa was doing his counting back and forth regarding number 19, he did not have access to AI, which we have today. I can, when we finish this series, all of the parts that are left, I can try to see if I can make a simple breakdown of Gerhard R. Puin's article in a PowerPoint presentation for the readers to digest.
Actually, that would be great. Yeah, I forgot that you actually studied the Rashad Khalifa and the Miracle of 19 and all of that. So if at one point you would like to do a session on that, that would be great. I haven't actually explored that in detail, so I'm sure it would be very beneficial to have you speak about that at one point.
Yeah, so Gerhard R. Puin, he doesn't touch on the number 19 specifically, but he sort of tries to approach it a bit like Rashad Khalifa, but much more scientifically, much more rigorously, and with a connection to the Pshita psalm. I think you will like it, but I will have to take some time to break it down because it's really complicated. All right. Okay, so let's look at the apostolic writings when it comes to this moment in history when the wound opens, the al-Fath, when when the new man is created. We read here in the Epistle of Barnabas, and this is an apostolic writing dated to 1st or 2nd century CE, in chapter 6, verses 13 to 14 in J.P. Lightfoot's book, The Apostolic Fathers. Again, I will shew thee how the Lord speaketh concerning us. He made a second creation at the last. So, like the hanging substance, the alak, that is like the last. That's the dead creation. But the Lord made a second creation when the wound is opened. And the Lord said, behold, I make the last things as the first. In reference to this, then, the prophet preached, enter into a land flowing with milk and honey, and be lords over it. Behold, then, we have been created anew, as is said again in another prophet. Behold, said the Lord, I will take out from these, that is to say, from those whom the Spirit of the Lord foresaw, their stony hearts, and will put into them hearts of flesh, for he himself was to be manifested in the flesh to dwell in us. So once again, this al-Fath, the opening, the start of the new creation. So we read in the writings of Jacob of Seruj, who lived from 451 to 521, in his Homiliae Selectae Maria Jacobi Sarugensis 5, dated to 641, from 641 to 658. We read here in his book, it's called Death and Satan, I believe. Jesus' death gave man life. Therefore, the story of his death is lovely. The death of the Son freed the captive man. The wine of suffering that he gave her to drink comforted her. He opened his side, that's the opening, the al-Fath, and cleansed her who was unclean. He wiped away the dust of captivity from her. The oppressor's fellow servants did not understand that the Son had come to die. They could not figure out that he would liberate all people through his death. He died for all, and therefore all have died through his death. Through his death, many mortals have been given life. So this actually brings us back to this sulbi. What the Quran is trying to say is that it was through the opening to the al-Fath of Christ's wound and the water and blood that gushed out between the solid, the dead, immovable corpse of Christ hanging on the cross, the alak, and the spear, this sharp object, which is probably what at-Tara'ib refers to in some way, the start of the creation of the new man, the second creation. So we can read this now in a whole new light, where we read خُلِقَ مِنْ مَاءٍ دَافِقٍ يَخْرُجُ مِنْ بَيْنِ الصُّلْبِ وَالتَّرَائِبِ. He, the man, was created anew from the spurting water going out between the solidness, between the alak, between the hanging corpse, and the at-Tara'ib. And here in Surah 96, the alak verse, we have like the conclusive proof what the Quran is talking about when it's talking about the creation of the new man, the al-Fath. We read here, اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق. Read by the name of thy Lord who has created the human from a hanging substance. So the Quran is addressing readers who know that when Jesus was pierced, that he was dead already on the cross. When Jesus was hanging from the cross, he was just a corpse. He was a solid, a dead substance, a hanging substance. And at that moment of time, when that hanging substance, the alak, is pierced, that is when the creation of the new man starts. Do you see the connection, or do you think it's too much speculation, JC?
I see the connection, and that's very interesting. I'm still processing this. Okay, let me just show you something, and then tell me what you think about this, because it's related. It's about the verse that you have just shown. So the Surah 86. Let me actually just go back here. So these are the verses that they are so contested because it says, in theory, like you're created from a liquid emanating from between the backbone and the ribs. So we know there are problems because nobody would have followed a guy who believed that. Now, when we go to the Quran and we have a look at, and this is what you're unpacking, is like there is a problem there. But let's have a look at the verses that come before. So this is Surah 86, verses 6 and 7. When we look at the first verses, so the first one, it begins with, by the sky and the night comer. and what can make you know what is the night comer. By the way, this expression, this style appears in a number of places in the Quran, quite a few, including Surah 97, when is what we sent it down during the night of decree, and what can make you know what is the night of decree, that thing. So this sort of language appears a number of times. So we begin with the night comer. So it's talking about the night comer, and then it says it is the piercing star, which of course this will be exegeted by people who are trying to make sense of this as, could it be the Star of David? But notice that 3 verses after this, you then put forward that is talking about Jesus and about the new creation. And in this verse here, so 3 verses before, it's actually even using this word that, if it is correct, if it is translated correctly, is piercing, which I would join this with these verses are all talking about Jesus, including who is the night comer, the thief that comes in the night. Were they actually trying to draw from that parable? It's like the hour will come like the night, like the thief in the night. Who is the night comer? And then it continues with, it is the piercing star. I don't know. What do you think about this?
You're onto something, because when you read the Syriac church fathers, if you take Jacob from Serouge, you take his book Death and Satan, and the book The Cherubims and the Robber, what they're trying to do is they're trying to bring alive what happened at the cross and fill in the blanks which are not in the Bible, so to say. So he has like a whole history, what's happening on the cross. He talks about like Jesus going to Hades, what he's doing there, how death and Satan are conversing with each other, and they are describing like everything that is happening in the universe, how the angels are not reacting in the cherubims and the bandit. A lot of like this language about what is happening in the graves, in the stars, in the heaven, in the earth, while Jesus is on the cross. So it will not be strange that the Quran is first talking about like, here's a star, piercing star, by the night, like all of this action happening, and then it says like, okay, man was created anew when this happened. It follows this tradition of the Syriac church fathers and how they are like making a liturgical drama regarding what is happening on the cross. So if readers want a deeper understanding, I recommend that they read Satan and Death by Jacob Serouge and this book called The Cherubim and the Bandit. Not quite short books, but if you read those 2 books, what we're seeing here, it won't be strange at all.
Well, actually, to me, the more we talk about these things, the more they start making sense. I mean, all of this verse begins with that, with nightcomer, then something with piercing star is weird, but I would assume that the diacritics are wrong. But then there is no soul, but what it has over it, a protector. I suppose that is going to be the Arabic who, which would be the same as there is no soul, but that he has over him a protector, or it has over him a protector, or something like that. Then it continues. So let man observe from what he was created, which is a little bit weird, even in the translation in there. But it actually ticks all of those boxes on a verse that, if it is read as it is now translated, which is you are created from a liquid emanating from between the backbone and the ribs, no one would follow a guy who says that, because it's just quite silly. But if the original meaning of this was some sort of a poem and it had to do with the crucifixion, I would certainly see how the poetic language would then make sense, and how they would have to actually change the meaning of the words, because otherwise it would point at something that Islam then denied, which is the death entirely. But I could see, based on what you are putting forward, that that these things would be about new creation right at the point of crucifixion. Through his suffering is how we are saved. And that would be a message that would be quite incompatible with, the Abbasids, and it would have to be hidden.
Exactly. It would have to hide the second creation, which has to do with Christology a lot. You have to put like some sort of biology on it, and the more biology you put on it, the more you obscure the original message.
Great. And we have a couple of questions for you, so that
Yes.
we can put you a little bit to the test. Let's see actually how you answer this. So my only question would be, why should it be so complicated? In my understanding, the Quran went straight to a total and absolute negation of the crucifixion, isn't it? What do you have to say about that?
Yes, so I would recommend Tafari Arabi, if he has the opportunity, to look at part 1 of this series, where we talk about this word salbi, and the way it has been translated as Roman crucifixion. That is what has actually led the scholars, the Islamic scholars, to draw the conclusion that the Quran is negating the crucifixion. But we made an in-depth analysis where we show that actually salbi does not mean Roman crucifixion because of many reasons, but rather it refers to some sort of solidification or cementing, so that when the Quran is saying وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ, they did not do this salbi. It's actually saying they did not cement him in the ground. They did not solidify him, because the grave was empty. He has risen. So if you can look at the part 1, and you will see that salbi does not mean Roman crucifixion, and that they put it on later because they probably did not know the original meaning.
Yeah, and I'm going to actually add something else. I'm actually just looking for the slides. So let me actually put the second the second question for you here, Nermin, and I will look for some slides that will, I think, give a more detailed answer as well to Fadi Arabi. So here you go. That's the next question.
Is not the word salbi the equivalent of the Hebrew word? Oh, I can't read Hebrew. Can you read that? I can read Arabic, but not the Hebrew. Do you know what it says there? If you can just Latinize the Hebrew word, but the Arabic means salbi, right?
So that will be in the Arabic, yes?
Yes, but what is the Hebrew one? I can't see what it says there. I will have to have a pass on that one, unless you know Hebrew, JC.
Nope, not my area of expertise.
Write to us in the comments. We can check this with Dr. Kerr later.
Okay, great. So I'm still looking for those slides. I'll actually come back to that in a bit. So if you want to actually continue for a bit, I'll just pop something on the screen in a minute.
Excellent. All right. So I will touch a bit on Dr. Lafontaine's research, which we can find in his book, The Great Secret of Islam. So he has some interesting things to say on regarding Surah 48, which is titled, lo and behold, Al-Fath. And he has done an analysis of the Sana palimpsest in his book, The Great Secret of Islam. And here he says something interesting. He says that the term messenger that is mentioned in Quran 48, verse 26-27, it appears to be a late interpolation designed to introduce Muhammad as God's messenger according to the Islamic narrative. The mention is absent from earlier verses, unlike verse 28, where it's mentioned as his messenger with the guidance and the religion, which is translated as conviction in Murray's translation, of truth, specifically characterizes the messenger Jesus, as in the Dome of the Rocks inscription, where Abd al-Malik portrays himself as equivalent to him. And he's referring to page 113 in his book. And he also says the verse 29, so that's the last verse of Surah 48. It seems to be like a lengthy addition, like all the other verses before that are like short. So basically, like Dr. Lafontaine is saying that we seem to have an interpolation where Jesus and the redemptive faith, the second creation, is being obscured with Muhammad and the military faith, the conquering. All right.
Yeah,
So
on
we
that,
see that-
actually,
Yeah,
may I
just
add?
gonna finish this.
Sure.
We also see here that in the Sana palimpsest, this word Muhammad from verse 49 is actually missing. So folio 32 ends at Quran 48 verse 2, and folio 33 starts at Quran 55 verse 16. What we can take from this, JC, which is a rational conclusion, is that probably like Surah 48 Al-Fath was a lot shorter in its original version than we have it today. And that the first verses of Al-Fath are like really important, and they symbolize a lot of the original meaning of the surah. What do you think about Dr. Lafontaine's research here?
Well, yeah, I'll cover that in a minute. Let me just maybe address first. So the question from Tafati Arabi. So let me actually just share my screen briefly. So does the Quran really just say Jesus was not crucified? It's like, no, not at all. The Quran doesn't really have dates, locations, is incredibly void of information. Hence why Mecca is mentioned once, which is most likely a mistranslation, Yathrib once, and Murad says it doesn't actually say that in the text. Zayd is not in text, it's another mistranslation. They make a word into a proper name. There is a lot of that going on with the Quran. For a Muslim, they will just say, nope, that never happened, and I know exactly what it means because it's very clear. That's not the case. So if you just look, for example, at the tafsirs, I think there will be the tafsirs just going to Ibn Kathir. So Ibn Kathir just puts together what people were saying about what happened on the cross. I think it's directly from 355. And if you read the English, this is actually the translation from the Arabic Ibn Kathir. If you look at the English, it's going to be very brief. It's going to give you basically the propaganda that you need to hear, the 2 or 3 options that will not confuse you. But that is not what the Arabic says. If you go to the Arabic, it begins with the commentators differed in their interpretation. It's like they shouldn't differ in the interpretation. It's like, can you tell us what happened on the cross? And then he's putting together all of these different opinions. For example, this is an instance of inversion. So some people saying it's a matter of inversion. What that verse means is, I will raise you to myself and cause you to die. It's like, who are these people to say that Allah has inverted verses in there? But you continue. Even Ishaq said, the Christians claim that God caused him to die for 7 hours and then brought him back to life. It's like, okay, so why would they even include that, saying that is actually what the Christians say in the tafsirs of Islam? Just say what happened on the cross. That should be, all of the so-called tafsirs would have to say what happened, period, as opposed to opinions. But as we keep reading, it gets worse, because then we have Ishaq ibn Bishr narrated from Idris on the authority of Wahy. God caused him to die for 3 days, then resurrected him, then raised him up. So now you're having in the tafsirs that they are saying that Jesus did die and did resurrect and then he went up. This is the Christian view. Muhammad ibn Ishaq narrated from a reliable source that God caused him to die for 3 hours during the day when he raised him to himself. Another different version of what happened. And we continue. And then I will cause you to die refers to death in this world, not death in the sense of physical death. I mean, death in this world means physical death. Is just kind of like the definition of it. But it gets worse. What is meant by death here is sleep. This is then when you get most scholars. This gets to a point where people have to tell you what Islam is. It has nothing to do with the Quran. People don't know how to interpret the Quran. They don't know what it means, where it came from. They don't even understand the language of it. So people are sitting down and they are trying to come up with every single explanation under the sun. And in the end, they have to, by consensus, decide on one that keeps Islam going. The belief that they've been told. The Quran has nothing to do with it. So in here, that Jesus would die means in his death. And then they put words in the mouth of Jesus, which is already a very clear heresy. When he woke up from sleep, and this is the Tafsir writers, by the way, that Jesus said, "Praise be to God who has given us life after he caused us to die, and to him is the resurrection." It's like, who are these people to write these things? And it gets worse. Other guys say, which will occur as in Jesus's death, when he descends to earth before the day of resurrection. And most Muslims that I have spoken with, they will say, we know what happened when Surah 355 says that Allah mutawafika Jesus, then that means that he will cause him to die in the future. It hasn't happened yet. It happens on the day of resurrection. He comes back, fights the Antichrist. That happens from tafsirs. The Quran never says that. And as you can see, everybody's saying something different. And then it means the death of a dream, because some of them are, a little bit weird. Jesus has not died, and he will return to you before the day of resurrection. So to answer your question, no, when you think that the Quran is clear as to what happened, no, the Quran is not clear as to what happened. When you go to the tafsirs, you see that people were trying to come up with an explanation that was suitable to their beliefs. It's basically bid'ah. They have the Quran in their hands, and they want the Quran to say what they have been made to believe, but they don't even know the source of the book. And you get this when you go to the tafsirs. But if instead of that, you just go to your mosque, your imam will tell you one thing, and you need to believe that, because otherwise you're going to be in trouble. And of course, you are not going to do that. You will have to take what your imam tells you, which, by the way, already contradicts the Quran, because that is shirk. If you take the opinion of a person about the word of Allah, that makes you an apostate. And when you go to a verse like this, it doesn't matter which one you pick. You are picking the explanation of a person. You are already an apostate. In other words, Muslims don't truly exist. So when they say Jesus was a Muslim and Moses was a Muslim, everybody was a Muslim, what they are really trying to tell you is there's no such thing as Muslim, because you cannot understand the book unless you go to people who they all disagree about the very clear book. But I hope that actually answers your question, and I'm sorry if it's a little bit disappointing, but it's your sources, and your imam will tell you there is nothing to see here, and don't put disbelief into your heart. So don't read the tafsirs, otherwise you know that is in trouble. Okay, so on these things, before I address your sections, Nermin, do you agree with my little expose there?
Yeah, exactly. And the tafsir writers, they have completely forgotten about the Arabian heresy, which says that when we die, both our soul and our body are destroyed. So the Quran is following along a tradition that goes back all the way to Saint Ephraim and to Afrafat, which was a response to this Arabian heresy that said, like, when we die, our soul is not destroyed. Our body is destroyed, but our soul is not destroyed. Our soul only falls in a state of sleep. So that is what the Quran is talking about, that death is like falling asleep. It's not talking about dying in your sleep, which they have like, because they're ignorant of the tradition that was before them. They sort of like, they're juggling their way through the text, trying to make up all sort of stuff, because they really don't understand the text, and they don't understand the Christological tradition that underlies the text.
Yeah, or rather, what I would say is that they could understand the text, they could understand it very well, or quite well, at least. But that was already after the ideology was created, and the ideology said Jesus did not die. So when you then see in the Quran that says Jesus dies, then you have to come up with anything else, because otherwise, you are on the side of the bad guys, you're going to hell and you're going to send everybody to hell with you. So you have to make up with an explanation. And when you go to the tafsirs, you can see all of these arguments. Everybody's trying to make up an excuse, and it's all a mess. But anyway, I've covered that at length in some other videos. Yes, going through tafsirs, and then I get comments from Muslims saying, no, let me tell you what happens. And he tells one of the 10 things that I have shown from their tafsirs, as though he knows best. And he's like, yeah, enjoy hell, bro. Okay, so back to this. So this fatah word, I totally agree with you. It is all about this clear opening, this clear victory, as it is translated. It means the resurrection of Jesus. And I think, I don't know if you are going to, if we discuss Surah 48, now you're dealing with the end of the verse of the Surah, but the Surah begins with, we have given you a clear victory, a way for Allah to remove your sins. Actually, let me just show it on the screen. Are you going to cover the beginning of Surah 48?
I have it. I was actually going to go into it.
Okay, so we will go to that in a second. Let me then just address this, Odon Lafontaine. So I think Odon is right, and he gets this from other French scholars who have researched this. That verse at the end appears late, but so basically it's an interpolation, but I think it's a very early one. And I think when it was inserted, it was before they started to create the stories of Muhammad. So when they inserted that, when they put it in there, they still were thinking about Jesus. And how that happens, I have no idea, still exploring that, because if you were to insert these verses in order to confirm the Muhammad of Islam, it would say Muhammad ibn Abdullah, walking from or riding the camel into Mecca. It would be very clear, but it isn't. And when you read Surah 48, verse 29, it's very Christological. So I would not argue that it is an insertion to the original text, but I would certainly argue strongly that it was a very early one, because these verses are not inserted to confirm Muhammad. Of course, from his point of view, proving that it was not part of the original is enough work, because whether it was describing Jesus or Muhammad, it's still not in the original script, and therefore it's game over. So I think whether you go with his explanation or with mine, it's still the same. This was not in the original script, and it's certainly not describing Muhammad. So I agree with him in that way, but I do think that it was not inserted in order to prove Muhammad. It was just inserted, and they still had Jesus in mind. It's my 2 pence.
If we do go with your hypothesis, what would be interesting to investigate there, and I think many people acknowledge when it comes to this, is how the Quran tends to give prophets and messengers and biblical characters alternative names. That's what needs to be researched more. So you have this, like Yunus, Jonah is the one with an N, right? And Dr. Robert Martin Kerr has also discovered that Dhul Qarnayn might actually be Moses, because of a certain translation of the Masoretic text, which actually points to Moses having horns come out from his head. And on the 5th part of this series, we will also look at the word Samiri, how that is actually an alternative name for God's prophet and messenger. So if you are correct, we need to explore all of that, and we need to break down all of the biblical characters that have these alternative names, because that would make it likely that Muhammad can be an alternative name for a biblical character as a minimum hypothesis. Anyways, so let's do Al-Fath, Surah 48, verse 1 to 2. And here we can connect to what we talked about in these inseparable Quranic operations. it was not the soldier that pierced when he pierced. Rather, Allah was the one who pierced. So we read, إِنَّا فَتَحْنَا لَكَّ فَتْحًا مُبِينًا لِيَغْفِرَ لَكَّ اللَّهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِكَ وَمَا اتَّخَرَ وَيُتِّمَ نِعْمَتَهُ عَلَيْكَ وَيَهْدِيكَ صِرَاطًا مُسْتَقِيمًا. And we see here that what God has done when he let the soldier pierce Jesus' side is he opened an evident opening for God to forgive us for what has progressed from our guilt. It actually doesn't say sin, it says guilt and what has delayed, to perfect our grace over us and to guide us a straight path, to get rid us of this curse, to free us from our shackles, and to create us anew. And we continue reading here. It says, وَيَنْصُرَكَ اللَّهُ نَصْرًا عَزِيزًا هُوَ الَّذِي أَنزَلَ السَّاكِنَاتَ. There is your favorite sakina. فِي قُلُوبِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ لِيَزْدَعُودُوا إِيمَانًا مَا إِيمَانِهِمْ وَإِلَهِ جُنُودُ السَّمَوَاتِ وَأَرْضِ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَلِيمًا حَكِيمًا. And here it says that God is the one who descends this sakina, which your research has shown that is probably they have typed it wrongly. It's probably the Shekinah, into the hearts of the believers to increase in belief with their belief. For Allah are the hosts of the skies and the earth, and Allah was knowledgeable and wise. So the new creation begins with this fath, with this piercing of Jesus' side, but we participate in it. We participate in this new creation. And verse 5 says, لِيُدْخِلَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ جَنَّةٍ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا وَيُكَفِّرَ عَنْهُمْ سَيِّئَاتِهِمْ وَكَانَ ذَلِكَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ فَوْزًا عَظِيمًا. Here, when we are created anew and when we participate in this new creation as male believers and as female believers, we are to enter gardens from beneath which rivers run, as a new creation, as a new man. And in this way, God will cover about us our affronts. And that is the great victory. So we are created anew. It begins with al-fath. And when you enter paradise, you don't enter it as the new creation. You enter it as the you don't enter it as the old creation. You enter it as the new creation. So does Surah Al-Fath now make much more sense? What God is talking about here, or what the Quranic author is talking about, or does it make it less sense? JC, what do you think?
Well, to me, it has made already sense for quite a while. If we go back, let me just go to the beginning. So here, 1 and 2, for a very obvious thing. First, in the translations, they will say, this is Allah talking to Muhammad. And it's like, well, absolutely not. He's not in the verse. And by the way, this is something that we could speak about at length in terms of oral tradition and why it cannot be even written in that manner as God is speaking to Muhammad and then is given through oral transmission. It doesn't work. But let's just go with what it says. If it's saying, surely we have given you a clear and evident opening for Allah to forgive what has progressed from thy guilt and what has delayed and what happened after. So basically, what to forgive your current sins and your previous sins and your future sins. So all of your sins are going to be forgiven. It's like, well, I don't know. But the Quran keeps talking about Jesus as the Messiah. That is kind of like a very obvious clue. In a book that keeps saying that Jesus is the Messiah, and we have seen as well in Surah 355, Surah 517, that Jesus did die. And then you have a verse here where the author is addressing the audience saying, you have a clear way for your sins to be forgiven. Is like, yes, this is just talking about Jesus. And it's a great thing that you have actually shown the other sources saying the whole thing about opening would make sense if they were familiar with those sources. But it also ends with, and guide thee a straight path. Straight path, we have to talk about that. I have talked about it before. The Quran keeps talking about the straight path, about following Jesus. And we can see that in, I think it's Surah 45, verses 16 to 18, very, very clearly as well. So these verses have nothing to do with Muhammad. They are about Jesus. And that is kind of obvious. With the rest, and after that, he descends the Shekinah, whether you take it as it means the Holy Spirit because they were confused, or the new dwelling place of God. So the believers will now be the new dwelling place of God. Their hearts, in fact, it seems quite Christological as well. And
The believers of the new temple, yeah.
Yeah, and then and then and he removes, well, he covers up their upfronts, and that was past tense, very important, was at Allah a great win. So it was the great win at Allah in a book that keeps talking as Jesus as the Messiah, when the whole conversation happening at the time would be, was Jesus the Messiah or not? Was he the Son of God? Was he, what was he exactly? And we can see that they have tried to play with the text, put Muhammad in these verses, but a plain reading will tell you that this was very Christian-ish to begin with.
Exactly. And before, it's like you have this first layer here, which is clearly talking about the opening, the new creation, the believers being the new temple in which God's spirit dwells, and then suddenly you move on to it being about like Arabs, or not Arabs, Arabians, Arabu, and then it ends with this name Muhammad. So you can see that the text has had its evolution, so to say. I also, one last thing that I will touch upon, and here I will have to go back to my presentation, so just one moment. This last thing, I will base it on video 26 of Dr. Christoph Luxemburg. So I have tried to decipher it as much as possible, and what he actually means. Yeah, let's try to make the best out of it. So we are here at Surah 62, verse 9. And you remember when we read John 19 in Syriac, this Arubta, the Friday, the great day. So we're going to talk about how this relates to verse 9 in Surah 62, Al-Jumu'ah. And its evolution from Jum'ah Azima, the Great Friday, to Yawm al-Ayuba Qurba, to the Day of the Great Conquest. So we read here, Ya ayyuha alladina amanu, idda nudiya lil salati min yawm al-Jumu'ati, fas'aw illa dhikri Allahi wa dharu al-bayya, dhalikum khayrun lakum in kuntum ta'lamun. Moving to the next one. So Saint Mora translated it as, and this is interesting, O ye who believed, when it was called to prayer. And Dr. Luxemburg here, he says that salat in the Syriac means like salwa, like comfort or solace, from the day of Friday, then endower into the remembrance of Allah and leave trading behind those is more charitable for you if you were knowing. And what Dr. Luxemburg's hypothesis is that this Jum'ah Azima, the Great Friday, is a historic memory that was lost during the Abbasid period, but it was preserved as Yawm al-Ayuba Qurba, the day of the Great Conquest. I can go back to the presentation here, right? Okay, like that. So he quotes certain sources. This Kitab al-Musahif that Dr. Arthur Jeffrey published in 1936, which he found in the Damascus Library, Al-Maktab al-Zahiriyya in Damascus. And in this Kitab al-Musahif, it says, when on the day of the great Arab conquest, Yawm al-Ayuba Qurba, a call was made to prayer. Qab ibn Lu'ay, Levi, the grandfather of our Prophet Muhammad, was the first to call that day the great conquest for Friday. And in another source, As-Suhail al-Rawd al-Unnuf, it says Qab ibn Lu'ay was the first that gathered on the day of conquest. He was the first that called it Friday. So they got this Jum'ah, this name Friday, because there was a day of great conquest that they like attached to it. So it became Friday, according to Dr. Luxemburg. And then he goes into like linguistic analysis. He says like in Syriac, they added the al, alif lam. So it was Yawm Aruba, or in Syriac Arubta, and then it became Yawm al-Aruba. And Aruba refers to the day of the setting of the sun, this Hurub al-Shams, which is the 6th day of the night of Sabbath, celebration, the Old Covenant. And John 19 was talking about Arubta and the Sabbath. If you remember from John 19:31, now because it was Friday, the Jews said, in Syriac, Aruba, let not these bodies remain on the crosses, because the Sabbath is dawning, for the Sabbath was a great day, Yawm al-Aruba. So he says that Dr. Luxemburg, Yawm al-Aruba was replaced with, later on, in the standard Islamic narrative, with Yawm al-Jum'ah. And according to Dr. Luxemburg, this is proof that before the Abbasids took over, the Muslims celebrated this Great Friday as the Great Conquest without being aware of the Christological significance. They just celebrated as a military victory. So I have tried to decipher his hypothesis here, because it was actually related to al-Fath is Yawm al-Aruba, Yawm al-Jum'ah. That is the whole point. You are commemorating the new creation, and that is why you should leave all business behind, not to perform a ritual physical prayer.
Oh, wow. So are you saying that that day used to be Holy Friday, and then in the narrative they made it into probably the day when Muhammad walks into Mecca?
Exactly.
Wow.
Gradually.
Just wow. Okay, so this one I was most definitely not aware of. I can see the obviously the connection, and Christoph Luxemburg has actually worked a lot on this. So I almost believe it by default, or certainly I would go like there is something in there. And if that is as the day of the great conquest, I would have thought that they would see more like the resurrection as opposed to the crucifixion. But based on everything that you have put forward today with the sources, that they were claiming that it is the wounds of Christ that create the new creation, that would then make sense, that they would be basically more focused on the crucifixion than on the resurrection, as the crucifixion is the thing that gives salvation, that becomes fatha, and in Arabic now is all about military conquest, as opposed to the most obvious reading, which should be spiritual conquest. When considering that the book keeps talking as Jesus as the Messiah, it would fit perfectly well that it was always about that.
It's like celebrating the birthday of the new human, the birthday of the exalted human. It's like celebrating the birthday of the new human that will enter Jannah, paradise.
Oh my goodness me, and they turned that into a military conquest that never happened. Oh my goodness me, my head is hurting. This is bad, man. This is really, really bad.
Or they took their own military conquest and retrojected it into the text.
Well, the whole thing is actually pretty much like this. Once they have to make the narrative about their guy, they have to look at things like this, and then they have to create the stories that fit what they want text to say. A little bit like with that thing that I've shown before about the Surah 355. You go to the tafsirs, they're trying to make it all about their new ideology, and the book is almost an inconvenience. It's just what they are stuck with because it used to be Christological, and now they have to give a different meaning to everything and add the Islamic view, which they have to create the characters and so on. So, wow, okay, so this has been fascinating. That's great. And I feel that we could have actually talked on some of these verses at length. So maybe after you are back from your holidays, we can actually set more regular streams depending on how you are doing with time, and we can go through more verses and just actually unpack them live. I know that you have some presentations that you are working on, so certainly we can actually do those. But if you're doing okay with time, we can actually do as well impromptu sessions where we just go through some verses and see if we can make them make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So if those sessions are where I don't need to have a presentation ready, I am all for it.
Yeah, certainly we can do that. There are many verses that you have discussed here that we have actually discussed before as well in other shows. Like we have discussed privately, oh, what do you do about this or about that? So maybe we can actually do some of those sessions like this where we just get some verses that we have our views on and we just go for it. Maybe I can actually pull up some of my older slides as well and try to brainstorm them. But for now, I think it's been phenomenal. Thank you very much, Nermin. And I hope that you have a wonderful holiday, very well deserved. And then after that, we can actually reconvene, finish with your presentations. And whenever you have other things ready, we do them and we do other shows as well. For people watching, thank you very much for being here. Make sure that you leave a comment if you have any questions, any ideas. Those are very much appreciated. So leave the comments later in the comment section below so that Nermin can actually address them. And yeah, it's been phenomenal, Nermin. Well done.
The pleasure was mine, JC. So this is part 2 of our series. Part 3 will be where we try to find the crucifixion, the resurrection, and part 4 will be where we try to find Christmas, and part 5 will be where we try to untangle the identity of Asamiri and Ukhti Harun.
Yeah. Okay, great. So looking forward to those ones. Obviously, you already know my views about particularly Christmas, which is actually there. But I have really enjoyed this final section about Easter because knowing full well that Christmas was this part of their traditions, in fact, is in the Quran, to actually see that they would have had a tradition about Holy Friday. It makes perfect sense. Actually, the more I'm thinking about it, the more sense it's making. So yeah, thank you for that.
You're welcome, JC. And if the viewers have any questions, they can put it in the comments and we can do some deeper research and get back to them.
Okay, great. So thank you all for watching. Make sure that you like, share, subscribe, do all of those wonderful things. The YouTube algorithm is not very kind to us, so we actually rely on your support to actually get this research out there and to actually get more people involved in this project. So thank you for all of your support, and hopefully we will see you very soon with more stuff from Nermin and more discussions. So Nermin, final words to you.
Yes, I would say that I feel like this is an uphill battle, and we usually have to take out the shovel a lot of times. But I do try to look at what the historians also have to say, and to try to find a middle ground between the shoveling and what the academics are saying. But it is an uphill battle. And I would love to go through these things with Dr. Robert Kerr as well, and see what his thoughts are, and see how we can see if we can find any commonalities. What I think his problem is that he's not using Saint Moran's translation and reacting to it. I think that can open up a lot of ideas and hypotheses. Yeah, so that's it. But this was a pleasure. It was really, and now I will focus on my vacation. Maybe try to put together some slides during the vacation, but mostly I will try to get some sun color. Inshallah.
Yeah, I hope that actually goes well, inshallah, and try to have a proper break. Don't do many slides while you are there. But normally when we go on holidays and we switch off from everything, that's when our brain works the best, and actually we get all of these ideas. So look forward to speaking with you once you have returned and see what other ideas you have had. So Nermin, thank you very much. Always a pleasure, never a chore. For people watching, thank you very much for being here. God bless you all. See you all soon. Bye-bye.